vendida por $2, pero el hacendado solitario cambió su destino para siempre. The village was surrounded by fields and mountains, and children played barefoot on the dirt roads, their laughter mixing with the songs of birds and the sound of the wind through the trees. But beneath the beauty of the surroundings, there was a reality that could not be ignored. Poverty was everywhere, and survival was a daily challenge. From a very young age, Mariana understood that life was not easy. Her family had very little. Her father, a farmer, worked long hours in the fields, his hands rough and worn from years of labor. Her mother, gentle but tired, tried to care for Mariana and her siblings as best she could, cooking simple meals from whatever little they had. There was no extra money for toys, for sweets, or for fancy clothes. Sometimes, even basic food was scarce, and the nights were filled with the sound of worry, whispered between her parents as they tried to figure out how to make ends meet. Despite the hardships, Mariana was a bright and curious child. She loved to watch the sunrise over the fields and the mountains, imagining a world beyond her village. She loved the small joys of life, like the feeling of fresh water on her hands when washing clothes at the river, or the sound of her siblings laughing as they ran after chickens in the yard. But Mariana also saw the sadness in her parents' eyes, the weight of their struggles pressing down on them like an invisible burden. She knew she could not stay a child forever. Life demanded that she grow up quickly, learn to help, and somehow find a way to survive. As Mariana grew older, the weight of poverty became even clearer. The neighbors spoke in hushed voices about how difficult life was becoming. Families were forced to make choices no child should have to face. Mariana's parents, despite their love for her, were overwhelmed by the daily challenges. They had more mouths to feed than they could provide for, and each day seemed to bring new problems. Mariana was aware of the tension at home, the sighs of her parents when the food ran out, the silent moments when they had no answers for the questions of their children. It was during this time that a tragic decision changed Mariana's life forever. One afternoon, a neighbor came to the house with an offer that would seem unimaginable to an outsider. Mariana could be taken from her family, given to another household, for a very small sum of money. At first, Mariana did not understand the seriousness of the situation. She was only a child, and the idea of being separated from her family was terrifying. Her parents spoke in whispers, debating the impossible choice. They knew it was wrong, but desperation clouded judgment. They thought it was a way to ensure she would have food, shelter, and safety, even if it meant giving her away. Mariana felt a mix of fear and confusion. She loved her parents and her siblings deeply. The thought of leaving everything she had ever known was almost too painful to bear. She remembered the smell of her mother's cooking, the sound of her father's voice calling her from the fields, the laughter of her siblings echoing in the evening air. All of it would be gone. And yet, deep down, she could sense that something in her life was about to change, that the world outside her village was waiting for her in ways she could not yet imagine. The day she was taken away, Mariana clung to hope like a lifeline. The man who came for her was not cruel in appearance, but to Mariana, he was a stranger in a strange world. She could feel the tension in the air, the silent judgment of those around her, the uncertain path that lay ahead. The journey to the new home was long and silent. Mariana held her small bundle of belongings close to her chest and tried to imagine what life would be like. She thought about the fields, the river, the mountains, and even though fear gripped her heart, a small spark of curiosity and hope began to grow. When she arrived at the hacienda, Mariana's eyes widened at the size of the property. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. There were large houses, wide fields, and animals everywhere. The hacienda was alive with sounds she did not recognize, the lowing of cattle, the neighing of horses, the clatter of workers' footsteps. Everything seemed enormous and intimidating. Mariana felt small and powerless in this new world, unsure of how she would survive. But even in her fear, she noticed small details that fascinated her. The way the sunlight fell across the fields, the smell of fresh earth, the distant mountains standing tall against the horizon. It was a world full of unknown possibilities, and somehow, Mariana felt that her life was about to change in ways she could not yet understand. The first days in the hacienda were difficult. Mariana had to learn quickly. She was given tasks that were physically demanding and emotionally exhausting. She had to wake early, fetch water, help with the animals, clean, cook, and perform countless chores that never seemed to end. She was tired in ways she had never known, and loneliness weighed heavily on her heart. But Mariana was determined. She refused to give up. She reminded herself of the hope she carried inside, the tiny spark that had not been extinguished by fear or hardship. Each day she tried to learn something new, to understand her surroundings, to find her place in this vast and unfamiliar world. Despite the challenges, Mariana began to notice the kindness of the hacendado. Don Eduardo, the man who owned the hacienda, was quiet and reserved. He rarely spoke, but when he did, there was a gentleness in his voice that surprised her. He observed her carefully, noticing her efforts, her intelligence, and her resilience. Mariana, in turn, began to see that not all adults were cruel or unkind. Some had their own struggles, their own burdens, and could offer compassion in ways that were quiet but meaningful. Slowly, she began to understand that her life, though altered in ways she could not control, still held opportunities for growth, learning, and even happiness. Mariana also started to build small connections with the other workers. Some were kind, offering advice or helping her with the hardest tasks. Others were indifferent, focused on their own struggles and responsibilities. But even these interactions taught her lessons about life, about resilience, and about the strength it took to survive in a world that could be both beautiful and cruel. Mariana realized that she would have to rely on her courage, her intelligence, and her determination if she wanted to create a life worth living. As the days passed, Mariana began to notice changes within herself. She was no longer just a frightened child taken from her family. She was becoming a young girl capable of facing challenges, learning skills, and adapting to her new world. Every chore she completed, every small success, gave her confidence. She began to dream again, not only about surviving but about thriving. She imagined a future where she could have a voice, a place, and a sense of purpose. The spark of hope inside her grew brighter, fueled by the recognition that life, even when unfair and harsh, could still offer moments of joy, learning, and connection. Evenings were the hardest. Mariana missed her family terribly. She thought about her parents and siblings, the simple life of the village, the little joys that seemed so distant now. She allowed herself to cry quietly, to feel the pain of separation, and then she reminded herself that she must continue. Life had given her a new path, and while it was unknown and frightening, it also carried possibilities. Mariana began to understand that strength was not only in physical labor or obedience. It was in hope, in resilience, in the determination to survive and grow despite the odds. By the end of her first month in the hacienda, Mariana had started to adapt. She knew she could not change her past, but she could influence her future. She began observing everything with careful attention: how Don Eduardo managed the hacienda, how the workers organized tasks, how the animals behaved, how crops grew in different seasons. Every detail was a lesson. Mariana realized that knowledge and observation were tools that could help her navigate this new life. She was determined to learn, to grow, and to find a way to shape her own destiny. Even in the darkest moments, Mariana's spirit remained alive. She understood that being sold for $2 had not defined her worth. It had changed her circumstances, yes, but it had not taken away her courage, intelligence, or hope. She discovered an inner strength she had never known, a resilience that gave her the power to face the unknown. Mariana began to understand that life was unpredictable, that pain and hardship were part of the journey, but that the human spirit was capable of overcoming even the most difficult challenges. Mariana's story in the hacienda had just begun, but from the very first days, she showed that she was not merely a passive victim of circumstance. She was a survivor, a learner, and a young girl with dreams that refused to be extinguished. Her journey would be long and filled with challenges, but her courage and determination planted the seeds for a future where she could change her own destiny. In the midst of fear, uncertainty, and hardship, Mariana had discovered the most important truth. Even when life seems cruel and unfair, hope and resilience can guide the way to a better tomorrow. Life in the hacienda was completely different from what Mariana had ever known. The field stretched for miles, and the house where she now lived was large and imposing. It had high ceilings, wide doors, and rooms filled with unfamiliar furniture. Everything seemed enormous, and Mariana often felt small and lost in the vastness of her new home. The animals, the gardens, the workers, and even the servants moved with a rhythm she had never experienced before. At first, the size and activity of the hacienda overwhelmed her, but slowly she began to observe and learn. Her daily routine was tiring. She woke up before sunrise, often before the birds had begun to sing. The first task of the day was to help with the animals. She learned to feed chickens, clean stables, and carry water for the cattle. Her hands became calloused and rough, but Mariana did not complain. She knew that hard work was necessary to survive in this new world. She also noticed that the hacienda had rules, many more rules than she had ever seen in her village. Every task had a proper way to be done, and Mariana had to pay attention carefully. At first, she made mistakes, but she learned quickly, understanding that her survival depended on her ability to adapt. Despite the workload, Mariana began to notice moments of beauty and peace in the hacienda. In the early morning, when the sun rose over the fields, the light glimmered on the leaves and cast a golden glow over the land. The animals had their own quiet ways, moving calmly or making soft sounds that were surprisingly comforting. Mariana found small joys in simple things, splashing cold water on her face from the well, feeling the warmth of sunlight on her back, or listening to the wind move through the tall trees. These small moments reminded her that life, even in hardship, could still hold beauty. Don Eduardo, the hacendado, was a quiet man who lived alone in the large house. He rarely spoke to the workers and often kept to himself, sitting in his study or walking through the fields silently. Mariana had heard stories from the servants about his temper and his strict rules, but when she first saw him, she noticed a gentleness in his eyes. It was subtle, almost hidden beneath the seriousness of his expression, but Mariana sensed that he was not cruel. She was cautious at first, unsure of how to behave around him. She feared that any mistake could anger him, but at the same time, she felt a strange curiosity about the man who seemed so lonely yet so powerful. As days turned into weeks, Mariana began to show skills that surprised even herself. She learned to handle the animals carefully, to manage water for the crops, and to organize the kitchen and storage. She was intelligent and observant, noticing small details that others overlooked. Don Eduardo began to take notice of her work. He watched her quietly, sometimes from a distance, sometimes offering brief advice. Mariana noticed that he was not just evaluating her labor. He seemed interested in her thinking, in her approach to problems, and in her ability to learn. Slowly, a bond of mutual respect began to form, though it was unspoken and subtle. Mariana also began to explore the hacienda beyond her daily tasks. She wandered through the gardens, fascinated by the variety of plants and flowers. She marveled at the fruit trees, the vegetables growing in neat rows, and the hidden corners of the property that seemed magical in their quiet beauty. She felt a sense of wonder that she had rarely experienced in her life. Each discovery made her feel more confident and capable. She realized that she could learn to navigate this world, to find her place, and to make a life for herself even in the midst of uncertainty. Despite these moments of beauty, Mariana's life was not easy. The work was exhausting, and loneliness often weighed heavily on her heart. She missed her family terribly. At night, she would think about her parents and siblings, the simple pleasures of her village, and the warmth of a home filled with love. Sometimes she cried silently, feeling the sharp ache of separation. But even in those moments of sadness, she reminded herself that she was strong. She had survived being sold to a stranger, and now she had the chance to learn, grow, and create a life for herself in a place that had once seemed frightening. The relationship with Don Eduardo slowly evolved. He began to speak to her in quiet, measured tones, asking about her day, giving advice on her work, and sharing small stories from his past. Mariana was surprised by the kindness hidden beneath his serious exterior. She learned that he had once been very lonely, and that his quiet demeanor was a result of years of solitude. She began to understand him as a person, not just as the owner of the hacienda. This understanding brought a sense of comfort and security. Mariana realized that even in the most unexpected places, people could show kindness, care, and respect. As Mariana became more confident in her work, she also began to notice her own potential. She started to think creatively about how to manage her tasks, how to solve problems, and how to improve the daily life of the hacienda. If the water supply was low, she found ways to ration it efficiently. If the animals seemed unwell, she observed their behavior and learned the best methods to care for them. Each challenge she faced strengthened her skills and her confidence. Mariana realized that she was capable of far more than she had ever imagined. Over time, Mariana also developed relationships with the other workers. Some were friendly and offered advice, while others were more distant. She learned to navigate these social dynamics with care, understanding that trust had to be earned and that cooperation was essential in a large household. Mariana found comfort in the small friendships she formed, in shared laughter, and in moments of understanding. These relationships reminded her that she was not completely alone, and that community, even in a place she had once feared, could provide support and strength. One of the most important lessons Mariana learned in these early months was patience. She realized that life in the hacienda would not change overnight, and that trust, respect, and skill had to be developed gradually. She could not rush Don Eduardo's approval or the acceptance of the workers. She could only focus on her own actions, on her own learning, and on her own resilience. This understanding gave her a sense of control in a world that had once seemed unpredictable and overwhelming. Mariana also discovered the importance of observation. She spent hours watching Don Eduardo, noting how he handled the workers, how he cared for the animals, and how he made decisions for the hacienda. She learned from his example, understanding the importance of responsibility, careful planning, and calm decision-making. She began to apply these lessons to her own tasks, improving her efficiency and demonstrating her growing competence. This not only impressed Don Eduardo but also gave Mariana a sense of pride and accomplishment. Despite the challenges, Mariana never lost her sense of hope. She continued to dream of a future where she could be independent, respected, and valued. She imagined a life where her intelligence, courage, and resilience could make a difference. Each small success, each moment of learning, strengthened her belief that she could overcome the circumstances of her early life. She understood that the choices made by her family, though painful, had brought her to a place where she could grow, learn, and build a new life. Evenings became a time of reflection for Mariana. After long days of work, she would sit quietly, looking out over the fields and the mountains, thinking about her journey. She remembered the village she had left behind, the family she loved, and the moments of fear and uncertainty that had brought her here. And yet, she also recognized the growth she had experienced, the lessons she had learned, and the possibilities that lay ahead. She understood that life was not just about surviving. It was about learning, adapting, and finding meaning even in difficult circumstances. By the end of the first year, Mariana had transformed in many ways. She was no longer the frightened, uncertain child who had arrived at the hacienda. She had become a young girl of intelligence, courage, and skill. She had earned the respect of Don Eduardo and the other workers, and she had learned to navigate the complex dynamics of her new home. Most importantly, she had discovered that even in the face of hardship, hope and determination could create new opportunities. Mariana's life in the hacienda was far from easy, but it was also full of lessons, growth, and small joys. She learned the value of hard work, the importance of observation, and the power of patience. She learned that even people who seemed distant or cold could show kindness and care, and that resilience and courage could change the course of a life. Each day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities for learning, connection, and personal growth. Through all of this, Mariana held onto a quiet hope. She knew that the life she had been given was not easy, but she also understood that it was hers to shape. She had survived the unimaginable, adapted to a new world, and begun to discover her own potential. And deep in her heart, she felt a growing certainty that her story was only beginning, and that the future, though uncertain, could be brighter than she had ever dared to imagine. Life at the hacienda had begun to feel more familiar to Mariana, but it was far from easy. She had learned the routines, understood the tasks, and even begun to gain the quiet respect of Don Eduardo and the workers. Yet, as she grew more confident, she also encountered challenges that tested her strength, patience, and courage in ways she had never imagined. Mariana realized that life was not just about completing chores or following instructions. It was about facing problems that seemed larger than herself, problems that could shake her to the core. One morning, Mariana woke to find that the sky was unusually dark and heavy with clouds. The air felt thick and tense, as if warning of trouble ahead. Don Eduardo called everyone to inspect the crops, and Mariana hurried to join the workers in the fields. She quickly realized that the recent rains had been too little and too irregular. Many of the young plants were wilting, and some of the mature crops had begun to dry out. For Mariana, who had poured her energy and care into the fields, this sight was heartbreaking. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her small shoulders, and for the first time, fear mingled with determination in her heart. The hacienda relied on these crops for food and income. If the harvest failed, the animals could suffer, the workers could lose their livelihoods, and Don Eduardo could face serious financial losses. Mariana understood that she could not ignore the problem. She approached Don Eduardo cautiously, explaining what she had observed and suggesting ways to save as much as possible. He listened carefully, nodding at her suggestions, and together they began to organize a plan. Mariana's confidence grew slightly, but so did the pressure. She realized that the well-being of the hacienda rested on her ability to think quickly, act wisely, and motivate others to do the same. The next days were grueling. Mariana woke earlier than ever before, moving through the fields with determination. She organized the workers, guiding them in repairing irrigation channels, reinforcing soil barriers, and finding ways to distribute water more efficiently. Her hands, already rough from previous labor, now blistered from the continuous effort. The sun beat down on her back, sweat ran into her eyes, and fatigue threatened to overwhelm her. Yet Mariana refused to give up. She reminded herself that she was no longer the frightened child who had arrived months ago. She was a young girl who could face challenges, solve problems, and make a difference. Amidst this work, Mariana faced another challenge that was far more personal. Some of the workers, jealous of her skills and her growing influence, began to question her authority. They whispered behind her back, doubted her instructions, and tried to undermine her efforts. At first, Mariana felt hurt and frustrated. She had worked so hard, yet some people still questioned her abilities because of her age and her status as someone who had once been an outsider. She considered retreating, giving in to the fear that had once controlled her life. But then she remembered the lessons she had learned in the past months: patience, observation, courage, and resilience. Instead of responding with anger, she chose to demonstrate her competence through her actions, proving her worth not with words but with results. Don Eduardo noticed Mariana's struggles and quietly supported her. Though he rarely gave direct praise, he made small gestures that strengthened her confidence. He asked her opinion on important decisions, observed how she handled difficult situations, and allowed her to take initiative. Mariana realized that he trusted her not only because of her abilities but because of her character. This understanding gave her courage. She learned that true strength was not just in skill, but in perseverance, humility, and the ability to rise above fear and doubt. As the crisis with the crops continued, Mariana faced another unexpected challenge. An illness began spreading among the animals. Some of the cattle became weak, and a few chickens fell ill. The workers were panicked, unsure of how to care for the animals without guidance. Mariana remembered what she had observed in the past months and quickly set to work. She monitored the animals closely, separated the sick ones to prevent the disease from spreading, and found natural remedies from the plants in the garden. It was exhausting work, requiring constant vigilance and care, but Mariana's determination never wavered. She knew that failure was not an option, not for her, not for Don Eduardo, and not for the lives that depended on her attention. Through all of this, Mariana also faced her own inner struggles. Fear, self-doubt, and exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her spirit. There were nights when she lay awake, thinking about the life she had lost, her family in the village, and the uncertainty of the future. The weight of responsibility felt immense, and she sometimes questioned whether she was strong enough to continue. But then she remembered the small victories, the crops she had saved, the animals she had cared for, the respect she had earned from the workers. Each success reminded her that she was capable, that her courage mattered, and that she had the power to change the outcome of her life. One evening, after a particularly long day, Don Eduardo approached Mariana as she tended the last of the crops. He spoke softly, a rare gesture, acknowledging her hard work and her dedication. Mariana felt a surge of pride and gratitude. She realized that she had grown in ways she could never have imagined. The timid, fearful girl who had arrived at the hacienda months ago had become a young girl of strength, intelligence, and resilience. The challenges she faced had not defeated her, they had transformed her. The following weeks tested Mariana even further. A storm struck the hacienda, bringing heavy rain and strong winds. The fields were flooded, some of the crops were destroyed, and several structures were damaged. The workers panicked, unsure of how to respond, and many looked to Mariana for guidance. Despite her own fear, she took charge, organizing the recovery efforts, protecting the animals, and ensuring the safety of everyone on the property. The storm was relentless, but Mariana's determination was stronger. She worked tirelessly, showing courage and leadership that inspired those around her. During this time, Mariana also learned the value of trust and teamwork. She realized that she could not face these challenges alone. She needed the support of the workers, the guidance of Don Eduardo, and the cooperation of everyone on the hacienda. She communicated clearly, delegated tasks wisely, and encouraged others to contribute their strengths. Through collaboration, they were able to repair the damage, save as much of the crops as possible, and restore order to the hacienda. Mariana understood that true leadership was not about controlling others, but about guiding, inspiring and working together to overcome difficulties. As the months passed, Mariana faced yet another challenge, her own feelings of isolation and longing. Even as she worked tirelessly, helped the animals and contributed to the hacienda, she missed her family deeply. Letters from the village were rare and visits were impossible. Sometimes, the weight of loneliness pressed heavily on her heart. But Mariana learned to cope through reflection and self-discovery. She found solace in her work, in observing the world around her, and in the quiet moments of connection with Don Eduardo and the workers. She realized that even in isolation, she could find strength, hope, and purpose. One of the most important lessons Mariana learned during this period was resilience. She discovered that life would always present challenges, some small and some enormous, and that strength was measured not by the absence of fear or difficulty, but by the ability to face them with courage, determination, and intelligence. Every setback, the failing crops, the sick animals, the jealousy of the workers, and the storms, was an opportunity to learn, grow, and prove her own capabilities. Mariana understood that adversity was not the end of the story, but a step toward growth and transformation. By the end of the year, Mariana had faced more challenges than she had ever imagined. She had confronted fear, hardship, illness, and doubt, yet she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. Don Eduardo recognized her growth, not just in skill but in character. He began to trust her with more responsibility, listening to her suggestions and valuing her opinions. The workers, too, began to respect her, seeing her as someone who could lead with patience, intelligence, and care. Mariana realized that she had become an integral part of the hacienda, someone who could influence outcomes and inspire others. Through all of this, Mariana's spirit remained unbroken. She continued to dream of a brighter future, a life where she could be independent, respected, and valued. She knew that challenges would continue to arise, but she was no longer afraid. She had faced obstacles that would have defeated a weaker person, yet she had endured, adapted, and grown. Mariana understood that her past, the days when she was sold for $2, the fear and uncertainty she had faced, had shaped her, but it did not define her. Her courage, resilience, and determination defined who she was becoming. The story of Mariana in these months was one of transformation. She had learned the power of hard work, the importance of observation, the value of trust and teamwork, and the strength that comes from facing fear with courage. Each challenge, no matter how difficult, had taught her something new about herself and the world around her. Mariana realized that life was unpredictable, but she also understood that with determination, intelligence, and hope, she could influence her own destiny. By the time the year ended, Mariana was no longer just a young girl working in the hacienda. She had become a young leader in her own right, someone capable of facing adversity with strength, guiding others with wisdom, and finding hope even in the darkest moments. Her story was far from over, but she had already proven that she was capable of turning challenges into opportunities, fear into courage, and uncertainty into growth. Mariana understood that life's true power lay not in avoiding hardships, but in meeting them head-on and discovering the strength within herself to overcome them. Life in the hacienda had begun to settle into a rhythm, but Mariana soon realized that calm could be deceiving. Just as she thought she had mastered the challenges of her environment, new difficulties arose that tested not only her skills, but also her heart and spirit. The crops were recovering, the animals were healthier, and the workers had grown to respect her, yet Mariana felt a growing weight on her shoulders. She understood that the decisions she made now would shape the future of the hacienda, and the responsibility sometimes felt almost unbearable. One afternoon, Mariana noticed subtle signs of trouble in the fields once again. The soil was not as fertile as she had hoped, and some areas were showing early signs of pest damage. Even with all the work she had put in, nature remained unpredictable, and she realized that success was never guaranteed. She gathered the workers and carefully explained what needed to be done to save the crops. Some listened attentively, while others were skeptical, doubting that Mariana's plans would work. Mariana understood that she had to lead not just with knowledge, but with patience and persuasion. She spoke clearly, calmly, and confidently, and gradually, the workers began to follow her guidance, trusting her judgment despite their doubts. As the hacienda faced these agricultural challenges, Mariana also encountered a personal trial that shook her deeply. One evening, she received a letter from the village, written by her mother. The words were simple but filled with longing and worry. Her family missed her terribly, and they wrote about their struggles, asking if she was safe and happy. Mariana's heart ached. She realized just how far she had come from the life she had known, and yet she also felt the pain of separation more keenly than ever. For a moment, she questioned whether her new life, no matter how much she had achieved, could ever replace the love and warmth of her family. The emotional strain was heavy, and Mariana found herself crying quietly in the evenings. The weight of responsibility at the hacienda, combined with the longing for her family, sometimes made her feel fragile and exhausted. Yet, she reminded herself of all she had accomplished. She had survived being sold for $2, she had adapted to a strange and challenging environment, and she had grown into a strong, capable young girl. Mariana knew that she could not give in to despair. She had to find a way to balance her emotions with her responsibilities. Slowly, she began to write letters back to her family, sharing small stories about her life and the lessons she was learning. Each word she wrote brought her a sense of connection and comfort, bridging the distance between her past and her present. Meanwhile, the hacienda faced a crisis that required every ounce of Mariana's skill and determination. A sudden drought threatened the newly growing crops, and the water supply from the river was dangerously low. The workers were panicked, unsure of how to distribute the water without risking even greater loss. Mariana quickly analyzed the situation, devising a plan to ration the water and prioritize the most vulnerable plants. She coordinated the workers, assigning tasks efficiently, and worked alongside them tirelessly, moving buckets, digging channels, and checking every irrigation point. The days were long, hot, and exhausting, but Mariana refused to give up. She understood that the survival of the hacienda depended on her guidance and determination. During this intense period, Mariana also discovered the depth of Don Eduardo's trust in her. He observed her carefully, occasionally offering guidance, but mostly allowing her to make decisions independently. Mariana realized that he believed in her judgment, and this trust strengthened her confidence even further. She learned that true leadership was not just about giving orders or controlling others. It was about inspiring confidence, taking responsibility, and making decisions with courage and clarity. Mariana began to understand that she had grown not just in skill, but in character, and that this growth was shaping the destiny of the hacienda itself. Yet, the most difficult challenge came not from the land, the crops, or the animals, but from human conflict. Some of the older workers, resistant to change and skeptical of Mariana's abilities, began to act against her. They whispered rumors, questioned her decisions, and tried to turn others against her. Mariana felt the sting of betrayal and the loneliness of responsibility. For the first time, she truly understood that leadership could be isolating, and that even those closest to you could doubt your intentions or abilities. She felt a moment of fear, wondering if she was strong enough to face not only nature's challenges, but also the challenges of human doubt and envy. In those moments, Mariana drew on every lesson she had learned. She remained calm, observant, and focused, refusing to react with anger or frustration. Instead, she continued to lead by example, demonstrating patience, intelligence, and fairness in every action. Slowly, the workers began to see her dedication, and their respect for her grew. Mariana realized that true influence comes not from force, but from consistency, integrity, and the willingness to act with courage even when others doubt you. Amid these challenges, Mariana also began to see changes in herself that went beyond skill or leadership. She had developed a sense of empathy and understanding that allowed her to connect with others, even those who were initially hostile or skeptical. She could sense their fears, their frustrations, and their desires, and she used this understanding to guide them, support them, and gain their cooperation. Mariana realized that emotional intelligence was as important as physical skill or knowledge, and that her ability to navigate human relationships would shape not only her success, but also the harmony of the hacienda. As the months passed, Mariana faced the emotional climax of her journey at the hacienda. One evening, a fire broke out near the storage barn, threatening to destroy valuable supplies and endanger the animals. The workers panicked, unsure of how to respond, and the flames spread quickly. Mariana's heart raced, but she did not freeze. She organized a group to carry water, directed others to move animals to safety, and personally fought to contain the fire. Her courage and quick thinking saved much of the hacienda from disaster. By the time the fire was under control, Mariana was exhausted, covered in soot, and physically drained. Yet she felt a profound sense of accomplishment and pride. She had faced danger, fear, and uncertainty, and she had acted with bravery, intelligence, and determination. In the aftermath of the fire, Don Eduardo approached Mariana with a rare expression of gratitude and admiration. He spoke of her courage, her intelligence, and her unwavering dedication. Mariana felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She realized that her struggles had not been in vain, and that she had earned a place of respect and influence in the hacienda. More importantly, she understood that the trials she had faced had strengthened her character, taught her resilience, and revealed the depth of her own courage. Through all these experiences, Mariana also began to reflect on her personal growth. She thought about the girl who had been sold for $2, terrified and alone, and she marveled at how far she had come. She had learned to navigate a new world, face danger and adversity, lead others, and care for both the land and the people around her. She had discovered strengths she had never known, including courage, empathy, patience, and determination. Mariana realized that life's challenges, while painful, were also opportunities for growth, and that her destiny was being shaped not only by the circumstances she had endured, but also by the choices she made in response to them. Mariana's success also had a ripple effect on the hacienda itself. The workers, inspired by her example, became more diligent, cooperative, and confident. The animals thrived under her care, and the crops recovered more successfully than anyone had expected. The hacienda began to prosper, and the small community within it grew stronger and more united. Mariana realized that her courage and determination had not only changed her own life, but had also transformed the lives of everyone around her. She understood that true influence comes from action, integrity, and the willingness to face challenges head-on, and that leadership could create positive change even in the most difficult circumstances. Through all of this, Mariana also never forgot her family. She continued to write letters, sharing her experiences and learning from their responses. The connection gave her strength, reminding her of where she had come from and the values she held dear. She understood that while her life had changed dramatically, the love and lessons from her family remained an integral part of who she was. These connections grounded her, giving her the courage to face challenges with confidence and grace. By the end of this period, Mariana had faced some of the greatest trials of her life. She had confronted natural disasters, human conflict, emotional loneliness, and personal fear. Yet she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Her courage, intelligence, and empathy had allowed her not only to survive, but to transform her environment, earning the trust and admiration of those around her. Mariana realized that the trials she had faced were not punishments, but opportunities to grow, to learn, and to shape her own destiny. Mariana's journey in these months was a testament to the power of human resilience, courage, and hope. She had learned that life would always present challenges, but that each challenge carried lessons and possibilities. She understood that fear, doubt, and difficulty were not signs of weakness, but opportunities to discover strength, patience, and wisdom. Mariana's growth had been profound, touching every aspect of her life, from her skills and leadership to her emotional intelligence and personal courage. By now, Mariana was no longer the frightened, uncertain girl who had arrived at the hacienda months ago. She had become a young woman of courage, resilience, and determination. She had faced the fire, the storms, the droughts, and the conflicts, and she had emerged not just unbroken but stronger and wiser. Mariana understood that life would continue to bring challenges, but she also knew that she had the strength, knowledge, and heart to meet them. Her story was far from over, but she had proven to herself and to others that adversity could be faced, endured, and transformed into opportunity. By the time Mariana reached the final stage of her journey at the hacienda, she had grown into a young woman of remarkable courage, intelligence, and resilience. The trials she had faced, the hardships of her childhood being sold for $2, the lonely nights of fear and doubt, the storms, droughts, and fires at the hacienda, had shaped her in ways that no one could have imagined. She had not only survived the circumstances she had been thrust into, but she had thrived, transforming herself and the lives of those around her. Mariana now stood at the threshold of a future that she had once only dreamed of. The hacienda had changed alongside her. The crops were flourishing, the animals were healthy and well cared for, and the workers had developed a sense of unity and respect that had not existed before. Mariana had played a central role in these changes, not only through her hard work but through her vision, leadership, and empathy. Don Eduardo, once a solitary man, now walked through the hacienda with a quiet satisfaction. He had come to rely on Mariana, not just as a worker but as a partner in running the estate. He saw in her a reflection of dedication, integrity, and strength, qualities that inspired everyone who lived and worked there. Mariana's own sense of self had also transformed. She no longer thought of herself as a powerless girl who had been sold, or as a child defined by poverty. Instead, she saw herself as someone capable of making a difference, of shaping her own destiny, and of contributing to the lives of others. She had discovered talents, resilience, and courage that had been hidden within her all along. Mariana realized that her early experiences, painful as they were, had prepared her for the responsibilities and challenges she now faced. They had given her a sense of purpose, a strength of character, and the determination to rise above any obstacle. One of the most significant changes in Mariana's life was her relationship with Don Eduardo. The once quiet, solitary man had come to value her judgment, rely on her guidance, and share his thoughts with her in ways he had never done with anyone else. Their relationship had grown from one of simple observation to mutual respect and trust. Mariana admired his wisdom, his calm presence, and the way he cared for the hacienda and the people within it. In turn, Don Eduardo admired Mariana's intelligence, courage, and resilience. Through their interactions, both had learned from each other. Mariana had helped him see the importance of connection and empathy, while he had guided her in understanding responsibility, leadership, and long-term planning. Despite the progress at the hacienda, Mariana never forgot her family. She continued to write letters, sharing stories of her achievements, the growth of the hacienda, and the lessons she was learning. The act of writing connected her to her past, grounding her in the values and love she had received from her parents. Each response she received reminded her of the importance of family, of love that transcends distance, and of the support that comes from those who care about you. Mariana understood that her growth and success did not erase her past, they honored it. Her journey had been built on the foundation of her early experiences, her family's influence, and her own courage. Mariana's story began to reach others beyond the hacienda. Word of her intelligence, leadership, and compassion spread throughout the village and nearby towns. People admired how a young girl, once sold and alone, had transformed her life and the lives of those around her. Her story inspired others to believe that even in the most difficult circumstances, change was possible. Mariana became a symbol of hope, demonstrating that resilience, courage, and hard work could overcome adversity. Her experiences taught a valuable lesson, that the challenges one faces can be turned into opportunities for growth, leadership, and transformation. Life at the hacienda continued to present challenges, as it always would, but Mariana approached them with confidence and clarity. She had learned that difficulties were not obstacles to fear, but opportunities to learn and grow. She applied her intelligence, observation skills, and empathy to solve problems efficiently, to guide others, and to ensure the well-being of the hacienda and its inhabitants. Mariana had developed a balanced understanding of life, knowing when to act decisively, when to observe, and when to listen. This wisdom was rare for someone so young, and it earned her not only respect but deep trust. One of the most profound moments in Mariana's journey came when Don Eduardo entrusted her with a responsibility that symbolized her growth and transformation. He asked her to oversee an expansion project on the hacienda, an endeavor that required planning, leadership, and vision. Mariana accepted with humility and determination. She coordinated teams, made careful decisions, and ensured that resources were used wisely. The project's success not only benefited the hacienda materially, but also strengthened Mariana's confidence in her own abilities. She realized that she had moved from being a powerless child to a young woman who could shape her environment and influence the lives of others. Through all these experiences, Mariana also developed a deep understanding of compassion and empathy. She had faced fear, loneliness, and hardship, and she recognized the struggles of others. She helped the younger workers learn new skills, supported those who faced personal challenges, and created an atmosphere of mutual respect and care. Mariana understood that true leadership involved lifting others up, not just achieving personal success. She began to mentor others, teaching them the lessons she had learned about resilience, courage, and hope. In doing so, she created a community where people felt valued, understood, and capable of contributing to a better future. Mariana also reflected on her early days, the moment she had been sold for $2, the fear she had felt, and the uncertainty that had followed. She realized that those moments of suffering had not defined her, but they had shaped her character. They had taught her empathy, determination, and the ability to face adversity with courage. Mariana understood that every experience, no matter how painful, held a lesson and an opportunity for growth. She had transformed her life not by avoiding hardship, but by confronting it, learning from it, and using it as a foundation for her future. As the years went by, Mariana's life became a balance of work, learning, leadership, and connection. She continued to grow in skill and wisdom, guiding the hacienda to prosperity and inspiring those around her. Yet, she never forgot the value of humility. She knew that her journey was ongoing, that life would continue to present challenges, and that she must remain vigilant, adaptable, and kind. Mariana had learned that success was not only measured by material accomplishments, but by the growth of character, the strength of relationships, and the ability to remain hopeful in the face of difficulty. One day, as Mariana walked through the fields she had nurtured for so long, she paused to reflect on her journey. She thought about the young girl who had arrived at the hacienda, terrified and uncertain, and she marveled at the transformation that had taken place. She had faced fear, hardship, loneliness, and human conflict, yet she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Mariana understood that her life had been profoundly changed by courage, determination, and the choices she had made. She realized that she had the power to shape not only her destiny, but also the lives of those around her. Mariana's story was a story of hope, transformation, and resilience. She had turned a childhood marked by fear and poverty into a life filled with purpose, influence, and connection. Her journey showed that even in the darkest moments, there is a possibility for change. She had learned that true strength comes not from wealth or status, but from courage, integrity, empathy, and determination. Mariana's life was a testament to the power of hope and the human spirit's ability to overcome adversity. In the end, Mariana had created a future she could be proud of. She had transformed the hacienda, gained the respect of Don Eduardo and the workers, and reconnected with her family through love and understanding. She had become a symbol of perseverance, showing that no matter how difficult life may seem, it is possible to rise above circumstances, learn from challenges, and shape a meaningful and fulfilling destiny. Mariana's journey was proof that even the most unlikely beginnings could lead to extraordinary outcomes. Her story did not end with survival, it continued with growth, leadership, and hope. Mariana had learned that life would always present new challenges, but that she possessed the strength to meet them with courage and wisdom. She had discovered that her past, no matter how painful, could be a source of strength rather than a limitation. Through her actions, she had transformed not only her life, but also the lives of those around her. Mariana understood that true success is measured not by what is taken from life, but by how one rises to meet it, how one nurtures others, and how one creates a legacy of courage, compassion, and hope. Mariana's journey, which had begun with fear, uncertainty, and being sold for $2, had led to a life of purpose, respect, and influence. She had proven that even in the face of adversity, human resilience and determination could overcome any obstacle. Her story would continue to inspire, showing that courage, empathy, and perseverance are the keys to transforming life, creating opportunity, and shaping a better future. Mariana's life was no longer defined by the hardships she had endured. It was defined by the strength, hope, and impact she had created along the way.